Japanese cars are mostly known for being sensible, well-made, and reliable, which incidentally is exactly the opposite of Italian cars. But what's also opposite of the Italians is the designs. Look at this. Robotically efficient, soulless, and sterile. Cars that are an exception to this rule are rare, but when they do happen, you can't do anything but just stare at them. That's how beautiful they are. Favorite best-looking Japanese cars ever made. But first,
Number 7.
In the 90s, the Japanese auto industry was involved in a brutal civil war. New sports cars were coming out every week, all pitted against each other and competing to become the ultimate JDM machines. But Honda, well, they had their eye on a tougher opponent, one that no one else dared to even challenge: Ferrari. Okay, the 348 wasn't the high point in Ferrari's history, but still, a fully fledged supercar is never an easy prey. Even so, it was simply no match for Honda's newest sports car, the NSX. Not only was the Japanese car faster around the tracks, but I reckon it was more beautiful, too. To achieve this flawless victory, Honda asked the F1 driver, Ayrton Senna, to help them with the driving side of the car, and Pininfarina Design House to help them with the looking side of the car. Yes, they used Ferrari's own weapon against them. The design studio that sculpted almost every road-going Ferrari was contracted to give shape to their competitor too. The result was a timeless, elegant design that couldn't be topped, not with the facelift, and not certainly with the second generation. There was no excessive fluff, no oversized grills, no crazy wings, or wild engine covers, just pure beauty. But the best thing is, because it was the first reliable supercar, it meant you could drive it and show its beauty every day. Poor Enzo would probably be turning in his grave.
Number 6.
How many times have you heard, "This concept car is what the next model will look like"? And when it comes out, that's not the same. Many people expected something similar to happen with the LFLC concept once it goes into production, because look at it. There's no way they'll be able to mass produce this thing without some serious watering down. But Lexus stayed committed to their original design and kept everything. Other than the headlight covers, not much else changed. The daytime running lights still looked like they were carved with a sword. The taillights had that cool infinite mirror look. The roof arches still hover over the C-pillar. And the front meshes, I think, improved with this new stretched effect. Beauty's in the details definitely applies to this car. But even without them, the LC500 shape is still stunning. The sharp front edge is eager to pierce through the air, while the rest of the car floats behind, like a trail. There's a great sense of motion, emotion, and passion going through every part of this Lexus. It's perfect. Almost. My only issue with it is this line that comes out of the taillights. From some angles, it makes this whole area look detached and weak. I wish they'd given it some stronger hips like Jaguar did with the F-Type. Luckily, the convertible doesn't suffer from it as much. What a car. What a gorgeous looking car.
Number 5.
If you thought, hey, this looks familiar, well, you're right, and it was meant to be. The 1971 Celica was Toyota's first attempt at exporting a sports car, and although it was sold worldwide, the primary market, you guessed it, was America. At this time, muscle and pony cars were all the rage in the US, and they clearly served as an inspiration for this sporty subcompact. Just look at it, it's like the greatest hits of the big block era, especially the liftback version. The tucked-in headlights are such a Camaro trick, but when framed with a wraparound chrome bumper, the frowny look is even more aggressive. The belt line is pure Boss 302, and those C-pillar slots, vertical rib taillights, and a small kick-up spoiler complete the muscle look. The 820 liftback might be small in size, but it comes with a large dose of mean to compensate for it. And sure, you could criticize it for being a ripoff, to which I say, is it really? The way I see it, the most popular sports cars in the USA all looked like this. Such was the trend, and if Toyota wanted to compete, it needed to look the part. Besides, how can anyone not like a downsized muscle car? It's cute and brutal at the same time. Kind of like an owl. Ooh, that's scary.
Number 4.
If you thought that the muscle Celica was brutal, well, how about this then? The R34 Skyline GTR, or otherwise known as the Godzilla. But this car, which was akin to the hideous monster, isn't exactly what I would call beautiful. Usually such cars have feminine traits like curvy lines, a slimmer body, and a sharp look. The Alfa Romeo Tipo 33, for example. The R34 Skyline looks nothing like it. So what's doing on this list then? Well, that's because there's another kind of beauty, a masculine kind. Look at it from the front of that Skyline. It's full of holes and slits and intakes and cuts. There's no flow, no design, just a bunch of elements stacked on top of each other. If you did the same to Alfa, it would have been ruined. But not the GTR. Actually, the more you add to it, the better it becomes. Here, compare these two and tell me which one looks better. The Z-Tune, obviously. It's more serious, more ripped, more brutal. It's probably the manliest car to come out of Japan, and that makes it the best looking car of such kind. Maybe they should have nicknamed it the Geralt instead.
Number 3.
In the 60s, there was a huge impact on the car designs coming from outer space. Have you ever wondered why Cadillacs had those gigantic fins? The answer is rockets. The Rockets had them too. But while Americans were competing with who's going to be putting the biggest ones on their cars, Mazda's approach with making the Cosmos look more spacey was wholly different. It had no fins at all, but it had something else. Proportions. Look at it from the side. The rear end is stretched so far back that it makes Nicki Minaj look flat, but it also made the car look a bit like a flying saucer. The tiny cockpit smack in the middle with the front and the rear being the same length and the same height too, otherwise it wouldn't have worked. And how about those taillights, which, when glowing, look like rocket engines? Oh yeah, nice little touch there too. In reality, the Cosmo was powered by a much smaller spinning Dorito, a first for Mazda, and it worked perfectly and complemented the futuristic feel of the car. Besides, if it had anything bigger, the front couldn't have been so compact and pointy. As for the rest, the Cosmo Sport is clearly inspired by the Ferrari 400 Super America, only I'd say that this time around, Mazda looks much better than Ferrari. And if that's not good enough reason to put it on this list, then I don't know what is. You mad, Enzo?
Number 2.
Some 30 years later, Mazda would strike gold again with the successor to the Cosmo Sport, the FD RX-7. Mind you, it did take him 3 generations and a shift in the global trend to perfect the design, but the result is undeniable. The FD is one of the prettiest cars to ever come out of Japan. That's no accident, since its designer, Wu Huangqin, was madly in love with the E-Type Jag, long before he would develop the same feelings for any girl. Wu's goal was to not create a Japanese copy of the Jag, but to use the same design principles that made it such a beauty in the first place. And so, the previously boxy RX-7 was now all about the beautiful silhouette with those swooping fenders and clean surfaces. Even the door handle was integrated into the pillar, so it doesn't interrupt the gentle flow. I'd say it wasn't so much designed as it was poured out of an expensive wine bottle. Today, nearly 3 decades after its introduction, the FD RX-7 still looks as gorgeous as it did in 1992, which is a hallmark of a truly timeless design. Bravo, Wu. Bravo. One last thing to add, this car has grace, which is not something I can say about most modern sports cars. The RX-7 is not arrogant, not in your face.
Number 1.
We cannot talk about Japan and the E-Type without mentioning the Toyota 2000 GT, which, according to 9 out of 10 dentists, is the most beautiful Japanese car ever made. But before you start criticizing it for looking too much like a Jag, know that all the best cars at that time looked this way. Jag, Ferrari, Aston Martin, long front with a short fastback cabin arching over the rear. And I just love the fact that it was Toyota who came up with this car, the most conservative Japanese manufacturer who was mostly known for affordable and reliable little cars, made this. Anyway, compared to the E-Type, the 2000 GT looked a lot sharper. There's an edge to its fenders, to the rear spoiler, and the greenhouse too. It gives a greater sense of momentum even when stationary, and look at those doors in relation to the side windows. I've seen others use this trick to make a car look faster, but never to such an extent. Another cool trick is the front. The real headlights are hidden under the pop-up mechanism, and that visually draws your eyes to these oversized spotlights integrated into the bumper. It makes the car look even lower than it already is, which is a trick Ferrari and Lambo would use later too. So yeah, don't call it a Japanese E-Type. This car is beautiful in its own right, and in terms of collectability, it's far more desirable as a piece of art than the Jag will ever be.